The world has been jolted by the latest horrific images out of Ukraine. Ukraine is calling it a genocide. I'm Barkhadat, you're with the Mojo story. We'll be speaking in moments from now to the German envoy to India. But before that, let's bring you the latest in that Russian invasion of Ukraine. Mass graves are now jolting the world. The Americans are demanding that Russia be removed from the United Nations Human Rights Council. India so far has walked a diplomatic tightrope, and there have been a series of abstentions by India at every vote at the United Nations. But will these images jolt India into a different response? And also, are we looking at the emergence of a new world order, one in which conventional diplomacy is being upended? These and many more questions we take straight now to the German envoy to India, who is our newsmaker on our broadcast of this day. We're joined by Ambassador Walter Lindner. It's a pleasure to have him back on the Mojo story. Good to see you again, Ambassador. And let me start by asking you whether you believe that this is a tipping point. The images that we're seeing out of Bucha in Ukraine, civilian bodies littered on the streets, children under attack, mass graves. Is this, Ambassador, in your opinion, a tipping point in terms of the world response?
Yes, Parker, it's good to be on the program. Thanks for having me. Well, if the images which we have seen, and the images are of the atrocities are almost unbearable. They're just incredible, very, very painful. If this is the truth that Russian soldiers have done it, then it's a war crime. That's for sure. We have seen civilians, we have seen people on bicycles, handcuffed. If somebody kills this in a war, this is a war crime. We have had quite a number of journalists there, including some German journalists who were yesterday brought to the place and could see with their own eyes the atrocities. And I think all probability points into the direction that this was committed by the Russian army. So this is a presumed statement here, but I think the investigations will show that all the probabilities show in that direction, and it's really unbearable.
Indeed, unbearable and possibly most likely a war crime, Ambassador. Now, you are having to grapple our position, the Indian position, which is a complex response, which has evolved since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, but which continues to manifest itself as an abstention when it comes to an actual vote at the UN forums. Is Germany pushing for a different response? When we had your top diplomat in Delhi this past week, Germany pushed for a clear response, at least behind quote unquote closed doors. Have you picked up that clear response from the Indians behind closed doors?
Well, first, on the first part of the question, the Human Rights Council, whether the Russians should be excluded from there or not, this is something which will be discussed among our partners, and there are very high hurdles there. 2/3 majority you will need there, so this is something which is not easy to achieve, and it has been done only once so far, I guess, in history, which was with Libya. But we are in close contact with our partners to see what we can do there. Now, in all our contacts with India, let me state it again. We are not teaching, we're not preaching, we are conveying our point of view. And I think we are very close in many aspects there. And I've said this often before, that every country has its different surrounding, its different history, dependencies, and experiences. So every country, of course, has to decide according to its own interests and regional location. So that's why it's perfectly fine that every state makes its own decision on voting patterns in New York or on other issues. Our point is just to say, if we don't stop Putin now, if we let this be accepted, this brutal war of aggression, then we all are in deep trouble, because then the next case of where a powerful nation wants to attack out of the blue its neighbor. We all will be suffering, and they will be saying we refer to the Putin case. Putin could do it then. Why can't we do it now? So this will affect all of us, including India, including Germany, including whatever country you have in the world. So that's why this makes it so precarious and such an important case at the moment. It's not only Ukraine. It's about not only Europe. It's about the whole world and our world of principles which we brought up for the last decades, that you have to respect the Charter of the United Nations and rules, and you can't just brutally attack a neighbor state. One state attacks another sovereign neighbor state. This is just out of question.
Yeah, you talk about how big countries could get emboldened, Putin could set a precedent. Is your reference to China? There is a wide expectation that if Putin is not stopped, if Putin does not have to pay for his actions, then you are looking at a new world order, one led by a China-Russia nexus.
Well, I'm not referring to one particular country. I'm referring to, a number of countries which could in future be tempted to do that. What do we know? What's the world looking like in 10 years? The balance of powers of, world is moving fastly. So I'm not only referring to one country. This affects all countries in the world. We have to stick to the rule-based order and to respect sovereignty, territorial integrity of our neighbors. Many countries in the world have disputes with their neighbor countries on certain borders. Many, not only India and China and other countries, but many. So if this all is now in the future solved by a military invasion of a brutal kind, then we are doomed. So that's why I want to particularly refer to all countries, all possibilities in the future.
You use the phrase, if this is not stopped, we are doomed. What is your worst fear?
Well, as politician and as diplomat, you always be positive and optimist. So I don't want to come up with doomsday scenarios. But, first of all, people are dying as we speak. As we speak, Putin is bombarding civilians in even hospitals and creating this kind of terrible scenes which we have seen on the images on television. So it's all these lives of these people, the future of these children, refugees. There are already more than 4 or 5 million refugees on the way. So this is already a big tragedy. But as I said, if the atrocities go on and on, who knows where they stop and who knows where he stops? What's in his brain? And as I said, in the future, if this example it's used by other countries, then we have other issues in other parts of the world. So if your fantasy is vivid, then you can imagine what dangers this comes up with. We know, as Germany was in the center of 2 world wars, and we have caused the Second World War. We know what danger is there if weapons and if aggression is, used. That's nobody wants to see that. Nobody wants to have another big military confrontation. This we have to avoid at any cost.
In India, there's a lot of focus on what is seen to be Ambassador Western hypocrisy. There has been, in particular, a lot of debate over India's decision to continue to purchase oil from Russian companies. The Russian foreign minister, after his last trip, is offering steeply discounted prices to India. Germany has come under a lot of focus in Europe. Your country's banks are warning of a steep recession if you were to block Russian energy. How are you handling this question of oil from Russia? Because doesn't a country first owe cheaper oil prices, reduced inflation to its own people?
Well, first of all, let me say that indeed the imports by India of Russian energy, be it coal or be it oil or gas, is very, very minimal. I think 1% or even less. So this is not really the issue here. And on the other side, it's also true that Germany, but also quite a number of other European countries during the last decade, we have been too much dependent on Russian energy sources. we maybe have been too positively thinking that Putin would never use this as a weapon. Putin would never start a war against his neighboring countries. So that's why we have built two pipelines there, and we have stopped one which was ready right now. And we have, of course, that dependency on coal. We have like 30% dependency on coal. We have the same about on oil, and then 40% or at least on gas. Now, what we do is, as we speak, since the war started, since Putin invaded, we have immediately started to come down to zero. Now, this can't be done overnight because we are a huge industrialized country. So we go every day we speak, it goes down, it goes down, it goes down. Now, we are anticipating that our dependency from Russian coal will be zero by August already. Every day we're decreasing, and then we will be zero importing from Russian oil by end of the year. Gas will take a little bit longer, but as we speak, we do what we can to reduce it without paralyzing our economy. But we are pretty fast in it, and we do whatever we can as soon as possible to get down to it. So let me repeat also, the problem are not the sanctions, the problem is the war. The sanctions are there only for one reason: to stop Putin waging this war, killing people, bombarding people. That's why the sanctions are there. So all the repercussions of sanctions should be addressed to Putin, because he is the one responsible to it. We would never have had a decision to make to have sanctions. This was caused because we didn't want a huge military confrontation, but we wanted to keep our pressure up on Putin, and that's why it's so necessary that we have a common pressure on him. If this is enough to stop him, good. If it's not enough, then we have another package of sanctions, as we did this week. And so that's the logic. If you don't have the war, then you don't have sanctions. So Putin, stop the war, and you won't have sanctions.
Okay, I have just 2-3 minutes left with you, and I just want to use that time to take a couple of questions that have come up on our live stream, Ambassador. So we have a comment from Mr. Banerjee, who says that these are shameful actions by Russia. This is Putin's war. The Ukrainians are paying a heavy price for it. As Indians, we are ashamed for not calling out Russia. Enough is enough. My question to you is this: you were very careful, Ambassador, to say that you are not preaching or teaching India, but if Putin is not stopped, there will be a doom for us all. Are you disappointed by the Indian response, or have you received assurance privately? And I know there's only so much that you can share, that there is that India has a path which is trying to contain Russian aggression. What is the word you'd use in your response to India's official position?
Well, it would be not adequate for me to be disappointed, because, as I said, we respect totally the position of each country. So if they vote in that manner or in that manner, that's fine. And if you see what has happened in the Indian position during the last 4 weeks, they already have changed, did steps in towards calling for immediate ceasefire, calling for stop of the violence there. So there is already some movement. Now, how far they go, that's up to the Indian side. Of course, we would have loved that India would be on a bit more outspoken there, but as I said, this is up to the Indian position, and I'm sure everyone in India also wants this war to stop immediately, and this is where we are in the same boat. Let's see how we get Putin to stop it. Everyone, every politician, every prime minister, every president who has a special relationship to Putin can use it. We try to do it also. Everyone should do it, but if he's not listening, there's no other way than increasing the sanctions, and sanctions. Otherwise, people die as we speak. Once again, people are dying, and it's like 10 hours car drive from Berlin that the war is there. The war situation is like if I go from Delhi to Bikaner. So that's the distance, and in Bikaner you would have a huge violence and a war waging. So that's why you see that for Europeans, it's really something which is very urgent.
There's another question that says people were dying in Iraq as well. Now, I've chosen this question because in India there's a lot of debate around what I call, what is perceived to be Western hypocrisy. They were not white people, so they were not given importance. Why doesn't the West, why doesn't Europe talk to Putin directly? What would you say to that, Ambassador?
Well, you see, some of these questions are, of course, they have a point of truth that maybe in the West or maybe in some circumstances we are not attaching enough importance to conflicts which are a bit further away from us. I think it's a bit natural that your population mostly concentrates on the things happening around your country. So the things, if the farther you go away, the less it is affecting you directly. So that's why I think this is, for the Europeans especially, a very urgent conflict because it's so close to us. But it's on the double standards. It's not that everything is like black and white. Remember our position in the West, to say, on the Iraq war, where there was a coalition of the willing. Germany and France and Russia were against it. Even if our allies were in favor of it, we said no. We are not convinced, Mr. President. We don't think this is the right way to do. Now, in the case of Putin's war, there is just no opposition, because if you go to Russia, there is no social media anymore. There is no free press anymore. There is no opposition anymore. Everyone is in working camps or in jail. So that's also a difference. In the West, we can talk about it and publicly and interviews and be criticized. Everyone can do that. In Russia, you can't do that anymore. So he is very authoritarian, doing what he wants, and I think that's one of the biggest reasons for this.
A last question. This is from Aju Kaju. No one can deny that Russia is committing atrocities against Ukraine, but international relations are unfortunately not governed by morals. We are not living in an equal, happy, or perfect world. And you have some sense of this in your country, Ambassador, with Germany also struggling with Russia-supplied energy. Given the real politics, what is your expectation of what we're looking at going forward, and what is the best case scenario in terms of what the world would expect from India right now, given our constraints, our dependency on Russia, and our belief in a multipolar diplomacy?
Well, it's true, we live not in a perfect world. Even so, I came into politics and into my conscious life started with a lot of idealism that this world one day will be a perfect world. And if you remember back in the 2000 millennium beginning, and when the wall came down, the Berlin Wall came down, we thought for a second, this is the end of history, this is the end of a Cold War, East and West, and this is, I think, also one of the biggest accusations against Putin right now, that he is doing away and he's destroying this kind of optimism, this kind of world perception that, yes, we can make a better world. By the way, we need our energy, we need our money, we need our time for solving the huge challenges for mankind, which is global warming, which is plastic and smart cities and poverty reductions. These are the challenges of the world, not buying new tanks and new weapons and new mines. But with Putin's action, he doesn't leave us any other choice. We have to increase our military spending and this kind of thing, and that's bad. He's taking away resources and time from these questions for mankind. So I hope that the international pressure will be strong enough against him to tell him this is just unacceptable. And one last point, maybe. I do understand there's a lot of sympathy also for Russian positions in the country. As Germans, we have had a very close relationship to civil society in Russia, to poets, to artists. Very strong relationship. They are almost our neighboring country, and in the history, philosophers, musicians. It's a close exchange between India and Russia. We are not the enemies, or Europeans are not the enemies of Russians. In contrary, we are neighboring people. It's just one president who is, for what reasons soever, attacking a brutally an independent neighboring country. And this is something unheard of. And unless he stops this, I think the tendency which I described will continue. And this is to the damage of every person on this planet.
Well, it's a complex, dangerous inflection point, I would say, after the images we have seen out of Ukraine overnight. Thank you, Ambassador Walter Lindner, German envoy to India, and I'm sure we'll bring you back as this crisis takes a greater shape and form. But we hope, of course, that it is contained sooner rather than later. Pleasure talking to you, sir. Take care.
Thank you, Bhargav.
Thank you. It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.